Are Asians marginalized and discriminated in the US? Do you get less opportunities than white people in other races? I'm really trying to shy away from discussions of discriminations and racism, primarily, unless it's in a controlled group, primarily because it doesn't really result into anything good to me. So I would rather just share some interesting facts with you, some interesting data about Asians in America. And central to everything that I will share is this fact that Asian Americans are the highest income, best educated, and fastest growing racial group in the US. We actually now make up the largest share of immigrants in the US. I will be using some statistics provided by the Census Bureau of America, Pew Research, New York Times, the National Research Center, and etc. So I will be providing the links to all of those research in the description box. But let's start with income. The household income of people of Asian descent exceed the overall U.S. population's household income. So the national average of household income is $63,922. So if you just average all the income of every household in America, you will arrive at 63,922. But almost every Asian country actually exceeds that average. So it is led by India at 123,700. So that means if you average all Indian household in America, this is the average income that they have. Taiwanese is 97,000, Filipino 95,000, Sri Lankan 89,000. Two Asian groups, so that could be any two, like Thai Korean or Filipino Korean or whatever. So the average is 89,000. Chinese is 85,000. Japanese is 84,000. Pakistani 83,000. Asian white is 80,000. Malaysian is 80,000. Asian and Pacific Islander is 79,000. Indonesian 75,000. Korean 74,000, and so on. There are only three four Asian countries or Asian races that are actually below the average, and that is Laotian, Burmese, Mongolian, and Bhutanese. Of course, this is good by itself. This is a good information to know, and from that you can actually already make some sort of a conclusion, but it is even better to compare how we are doing versus other races, versus whites, Latinos, and African Americans. So on your screen right now, you will see a statistic that show you that our earnings are actually above the average earning of whites, Latinos, and almost double that of African Americans. And a lot of this is based on the 2019 Census Bureau, by the way. But one good thing is that everyone is accelerating. So every single race is actually earning better. Of course, there's another layer to that, and basically that's inflation. So this is measuring the number, the quantity of the money that we're getting, and not necessarily the value of the money that we have. But that's another discussion. Now, of course, there's the question of a lot of people is, why are we earning better? What is it that's making us earn better? There's actually one theory that says because there are less Asians in the US, there's less weight to pull. I don't necessarily entirely subscribe to this, but what it basically means is that if there are less people to feed, then there's better distribution. To a certain extent, I kind of understand, because if there are more people working in a household, even though everyone is just earning average, then of course there's better distribution of wealth. If in a single household there's somebody earning 200,000, but then there are 7 people in the household, then the distribution is still lower. But then let us remember that everything is averaged out. So for me, it is only slightly relevant. I think what is more relevant is the fact that many, if not majority, but many Asians that are coming to America are already doing well. They're already wealthy, or at least they have some sort of money to start with, because it's not easy to come to America coming from Asia. For many Mexicans, the border is just more accessible. For us, we have to fly, and getting that ticket, paying for that ticket, is just way more expensive. So that could be one factor. But an even more important consideration and an even more factor that contributes to us earning better is the value that we put on education, the tremendous focus that we put on education. The national average for a college graduate is 34%. So if you average everybody graduating from college in the US is 34%. But the average for Asians are way higher. So in fact, there's only 5 countries that are lower than the national average. Taiwanese is actually leading the charge. So if you average Taiwanese population in America, 83% of them would be college graduates. Indian, 79%. Then you have Filipinos, 51, Sri Lankan, 60, 2 Asian groups. I've discussed that this should be 2 different Asian groups. So if it's Thai, Filipino, or Japanese, Korean. So the average would be 55%. Chinese is 60%. Japanese 53, Pakistani 60, Asian white 55, Malaysian 68, and so on. So that, of course, affords us or allows us to actually get better paying jobs, which leads me to my next point, which is employment. Asian Americans often have the lowest unemployment rate across all races, except during the pandemic. The pandemic was the only time that we actually have higher unemployment than that of other countries. But throughout history, from the time that census actually started including Asians in their employment census, then we have emerged to be the most employed, basically. So, but that we just like working. That's the bottom line. If we can't find a job that is consistent with the profession that we prefer, we just take any kind of job out there. So that contributes to our earnings. But that's not employment by itself is not the only thing. It's also the type of work that we pursue. Asian Americans are more likely to be found in higher paid roles and have the highest median weekly earnings of any group. 1,310 per week in 2020 compared to the overall median of $984. So we're above the median by almost $400. So we are well represented in higher paying jobs such as anything that involves computers, mathematics, occupations, including software development, computer systems and analytics or analysts. Of course, we're in the healthcare industry, nurses, doctors, and stuff like that. So 23% of the workforce of STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, that would be Asian. So 23% would be Asian. Even though the Asian population is only 6.3% of the total workforce population. So the total workforce population, 6.3% of that would be Asian. But if you account for STEM-related jobs, science, technology, engineering, and math, 23% of that would be Asian. And they're almost always the highest paying jobs. And so that's pulling our average up. However, we could actually be doing more if we are not represented in the lower earners as well. There's a lot of Asians that are in the self-care industry. So manicurists, pedicurists, hairdressers, massagers and stuff. We are well represented in that category. And so that's pulling our average down. So if we actually take that out of the equation, our average is actually going to be higher. But they are Asian, so they're included in the averaging. Next is entrepreneurship. In the total population of America, 5.4% would be Asia. But 10% of businesses are owned by Asians. Isn't that amazing? So remember, there's only 5.4% Asians in the total population of America. But in the business sector, 10% would be owned by Asians. Don't you think that's amazing? That only speaks of the entrepreneurship of many Asians. However, Asian population is actually growing. Well, people of color, the population of POC is actually growing. On your screen right now is a map that shows two things: white arrow red arrow and green arrow. The green arrow represents the growth of Asian population, and then the red arrow represents the growth of white population. So as you can see, in more counties in the US, the POC population is actually growing. And they're saying that this trend is consistent with the projection that by 2060, white will be the minority and POC will be the majority. Very, very interesting. So does discrimination exist? Does racism exist against Asians? Most likely. Is it institutional? There's a debate going on about it, but one thing is for sure. Whether or not discrimination and racism exist, it doesn't matter. We are rising above it all. We have the value of actually putting our own fate and our own destiny on our hands, that it's allowing us to rise above all the challenges and all the hardships. And it's showing. We are the highest earner, best educated, and fastest growing race in America.